Hi everyone, it's Tom Young here for the final episode of STRI and Polypipe's Why Should I Care About Water Management? And we've got a slightly different episode this week where we're picking up on some of the themes that Sean Robinson talked about in episode 3, where we're looking at temporary surfaces and some of the issues that come around building these temporary surfaces, but also some of the solutions that we've previously been involved in the past. So I'll pass over to Charlotte, who can introduce our today's guest and a bit about the project.
Thank you, Tom. Yes, Charlotte here again from Polypipe. For us, it's all about innovation, and we're really delighted to be able to take part in projects and trials that really push the boundaries of what the permavoid system can do, and specifically in partnership. And I'll hand over to Sue to talk about how this vision was able to become a reality.
Many thanks, Charlotte. I'm Sue Catton, former head of events at England Hockey for 6 years, and now the project lead for Big Stadium Hockey, which is, as Charlotte said, a really innovative concept that came out of our desire at England Hockey to increase our fan base, and based on the fact that we have limited capacity at our home at Lee Valley Hockey and Tennis Centre, we wanted to look at how we could develop that and really take our fan base and our fan experience forward for some of our international matches.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we'll dive straight in. We've got some fantastic pictures and slides of the whole process, so I'll just get them up on the screen now.
So obviously with such a big desire, we needed to do this in partnership, and after the World Cup, the Women's World Cup, which we hosted in 2018, we really set our focus on how we could continue to increase that fan base, and looked at developing a partnership of experts in the field that could effectively mean we could move our international turf pitches from one location to another. Sounds easy on the face of it, but needed lots of research, lots of R&D, and certainly investment to bring this to fruition. So very pleased to be able to work with Polypipe, STRI and Polytan to bring this to fruition.
So I think, Sue, I remember when we had that first call where we talked about the project, and I think that was in the winter of 2018, and then the project quite quickly got momentum because you obviously identified the opportunity at the Stoop later on that year. So it's we quite quickly realised that we had to do some initial proof of concepts up at STRI, which we hosted, and you guys came along and had a look at.
Yeah, and this stage one was absolutely essential. Before we formalised the partnership, we needed to know that the components that we were considering could actually had the basis of a delivery model for us. So those trials in September, October up at Bingley were absolutely essential, and for us to look at the investment needed to take this to stage two, this gave us the confidence that we needed to do that.
And obviously we had to pick some high quality athletes to come up and test the initial test bed.
Yes, clearly came up with the sticks in the back of the car for that. But what we did learn, even from a low quality athlete on the pitch, was that the basis of the ball bounce, the flatness of surface, the stability underfoot, those key features were there in the components that we'd selected. We just needed to fine tune those and make sure that they would work obviously over a much bigger surface area, and that the practicalities of getting the flatness could be achieved.
Yeah, I suppose here it's probably, is it worth just talking a little bit about the components which we looked at?
Yes, I mean, on the ground itself, we knew that we were going to have to do works at the Stoop to flatten that surface. So we were going on to Taram on the ground conditions, followed by the strength that the permavoid layer gave us as a sub-base, and obviously the key attenuation properties, as well as the stability and the strength of that system to be able to roll out the other layers on top of that. I think at this stage one, it was very early days in terms of understanding the shock pad properties, and so this was almost a sort of a holding element, because we knew we could adjust the profile of shock pads post that. And the turf that we used here was a standard artificial turf, not the elite polytan that we'd be using at the Stoop.
So that obviously led on to the requirement to have a much bigger trial area, which I believe was in the March of 2019, so quite soon after those initial trials.
That's correct, Tom. And when you look at this, the speed at which this project moved, from bringing that concept in September through to a trial of this scale in March, having got formal commitments from our partners and raised money before that trial, it was real teamwork and real sense of purpose from the members of this partnership. So great from an England hockey perspective to be able to receive the support of Sport England as well to support with this funding. So they really saw the value in being able to maximise the reach of this type of technology as well. So we came to March, as you've said. It shows a good day here, but the build up to this was very challenging with the weather, certainly. The FIH, our international federation, were very supportive in this journey. They required us to do this size of a trial. And the great thing about being able to do this trial at Bisham Abbey, again with the support of Sport England, was that our elite squads, the GB and England teams, are based at Bisham Abbey. And you can see from the footage and pictures here that we very much put athletes at the heart of this testing. Ultimately, this needed to be safe. It needed to replicate elite international performance standards, and athletes needed to be confident that they could perform the skills that they do obviously on a daily basis. You can see here the full area, the third of the pitch in situ. We were able to put under that turf 4 different orientations of permavoid, of different shock pads, and to be able to take athlete feedback on each of those areas so that we could home in on the best solution for this type of need.
Yeah, and I think you mentioned there's any kind of project like this always has slight hiccups, doesn't it? And we did have an extremely wet March, and I think quite a few lessons were learnt then, weren't they? Kind of we tested the whole system under the most extreme conditions on not ideal kind of base soil. And
absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we learned so much from that, and it certainly tested the team in coming up with the solutions to then fix that. And ultimately, you know, we definitely learned that the sub base, the ground base below that, was absolutely key. The system itself could level out some inconsistencies, but getting the ground true, you know, below that and flat from a hockey perspective, that was going to be a key requirement.
So that takes us on quite nicely onto the actual real event in June at the Stoop in London. And I suppose, Sue, do you want to just talk a little bit about the partnership with Harlequins that you guys have got?
Yeah, clearly there was no point doing all this work if we didn't have a stadium to take this to. And from contacts within England Hockey, we built up a great partnership with Harlequins Rugby, with the men's and the women's teams there, and they were happy to basically welcome us to their venue and give us their venue outside of the rugby season to be able to bring our hockey events here. We were bringing a double header against New Zealand, men and women, Great Britain, June 24th, I think it was now. And clearly we needed to do some work. Most rugby pitches do have crowns. their pitch was at the stage that it did need some drainage works. So, and I think from an England hockey perspective, a lot of our major hockey clubs are based or big clubs are based in this vicinity. It's easily accessible, and ultimately the fan base of a rugby club and hockey club, have got a lot of synergies. So we had the makings of a really great partnership with them as well.
Yeah, and I suppose just from our point of view, we as STRI, we were involved in the building of this and the design of this, and essentially Harlequins got a very good pitch out of it, because ultimately this area had to go back to being a rugby pitch after all of this event. And you're right, the Harlequins were very kind of accommodating and gave us plenty of time. And essentially what we did was we stripped the topsoil off, moved it around and made it a bit more level, but with still a crown. So after all the events took place, the pitch would go back to how it was, installed some new drainage into the system, because we obviously altered it by moving all the surface around, and then left it ready for some testing, which we did afterwards, and a good few thousand Clegg readings and straight edge readings. And because what essentially we did to that surface was compact it to a greater extent than what we would do for a normal rugby pitch. But the idea being that we could reinstate that and alleviate that compaction after the event. And all this test on a grid basis showed that there were some areas which needed a bit of extra work. That was then done, and then it was retested to eventually that sub base was signed off, and then the works, which we'll talk about in a second, could then take place.
Yeah, I think it's important to add at this point that obviously we didn't just do this as a one-off for 1 year. We have a longer term relationship with Harlequins and intend to go back there in future years. Made that investment worthwhile from an England hockey perspective. Yeah, so moving on to the game itself, we probably had a 2-week build period following the completion of the earthworks. That was slightly longer than we really needed, but we wanted to build a little bit of slack in there, because obviously it's very new. We needed to make sure that we weren't going to fall foul of the weather. You can see here that the permavoid is going on in really well. It was really key to get this square and true, and guys at SEL working with permavoid and Polypipe did a great job in getting this installed, with some of our overlay contractors as well at CSM. And you can see here the ProPlay shot pad that was eventually chosen to go on top of the permavoid. And we know that certainly the voids within the permavoid and the attenuation properties of that were really key from a Quins perspective, and also from a performance perspective for hockey as well.
Got a nice time lapse here, Sue, of the actual build up.
Yes, this condenses 2 weeks work into something like 15 seconds. You can see the permavoid going down there, then the ProPlay on top of that, and then we start to roll out and lay and seam the polytan turf on top of that ahead of training starting.
Yeah, looks easy, doesn't it, when it's that quick?
It certainly does look easy. We obviously had a fair bit of labour to support that, but in fact, we didn't run into too many problems at all. We line marked as well on the day, so we hit all the timescales that we wanted to do. The plan went well.
Yeah, and I think it just showed all the problems we had in March, say, luckily didn't really take place here, but it was kind of, you have to be prepared, don't you, for that worst case kind of rain weather. Luckily, we were quite blessed with the weather during that week.
Yeah, in the build up, we did have a lot of dry weather, which really did help.
And so onto the kind of the final sign-off period before the game could go ahead, and I'm guessing you had a few sleepless nights before the final field assessment was conducted.
Yes, I think we knew everything was going down well, so we had the basis of confidence. But until you actually do the assessment, you don't know that is going to deliver what we'd all worked so hard to get. And clearly, the FIH had to adjust their testing protocols slightly just because of the timescales involved, and there was a lot more emphasis actually on player feedback as part of their assessment process. But we didn't move away too far from the normal standards of an elite global FIH standard.
Yeah, okay. And in terms of the results of that, I assume that everything was fine.
Yes, if you move on to the next slides, Tom, we had to be within 85% of that FIH standard, and you can see here that we achieved that target of 85%, or in some cases we're absolutely fully compliant with a 100% standard permanent in situ venue. So, I mean, these are fantastic results for the partnership, for the sport, and for the future of big stadium hockey. And I think, you know, the icing on the cake was really the feedback that we got from the players, who effectively, after I think they'd trained on it for the first time on the Thursday ahead of the matches, really didn't recognise that they were playing on a temporary facility. It just felt like another pitch anywhere in the world to them, and that was the biggest endorsement that we could possibly receive, that you know, they were playing hockey and they were able to do and perform the skills to their full ability and weren't varying their game in any way.
Yeah, and then obviously we've got here a picture of one of the training sessions, and it just looks fantastic, doesn't it? I know you had quite a lot of comments from the guys at the Stoop, essentially saying it looks like it belongs there, doesn't it? It shouldn't, you know, it doesn't look temporary at all.
Absolutely, and being there during the install for that 2-week period and watching it go in, and hearing the feedback from the Stoop players and the staff there, I mean, they were just gobsmacked with it. I think the bright blue, it really brought the stadium to life, and it just sat beautifully within the rugby pitch and the rugby environment. And you know, the stands, to have stands on 4 sides with roofs, I mean, the atmosphere on that game day, it just reverberated, and it's everything that hockey should have, you know, as a sport going forward. So yeah, we were really pleased, not just with the performance, but, you know, with the outputs from that game as well.
And Sue, do you mind me asking how you irrigated the hockey pitch during this period? We've talked a lot about sort of the construction, but obviously it's really important that we manage the water at all times, and these series are about water management. So could you tell us just a little bit about the processes for ensuring the irrigation was correct during this period?
Absolutely, Charlotte. I mean, it was, again, you know, the number of things that we had to vary and adjust and modify and solve with this project were many, and watering was just one of them. And the system, the in situ system at the Stoop, didn't afford us the pressure levels that we needed to apply, you know, the volume of water in an 8-minute half-time period. So we spoke to our friends in the fire services mixed hockey team, actually, who are a very successful hockey team, and they were able to support us with if you like, a temporary irrigation solution, which actually worked really well. We could be really focused with the fire hoses, 4 fire hoses, 2 operatives per fire hose, and a tank of water that we brought in, and it enabled us to be really precise in applying the water. We didn't get spray that was being wasted in any way, and the properties of the turf, the ProPlay and the Permavoid all supported water retention. So actually the volumes of water that we had to use on this pitch were significantly lower than some of the in situ pitches that we play at as well. So we were really pleased with that aspect.
So a much more sustainable approach to sport in general then, if we're reducing the need for potable water on these kind of applications. Yes,
absolutely, and I think it's something, you know, that some of the in situ facilities could look at as well with a permavoid base going forward.
Thank you, Sue.
So Sue, in terms of, I know there was a bigger picture for England hockey in terms of this, it wasn't meant to just be a single event, and you were obviously looking for the longer term. So can you just go over maybe a little bit of, you know, your longer term thinking for the project?
Yes, I think whilst clearly we had to invest in the research and development and of that project for that year, I mean, we've subsequently installed a similar system for the Olympic qualifiers for Hockey Ireland in October of early November 2019. We know that this system can be replicated. We know that we can move it and transport it. And what that gives hockey is the chance to take a temporary surface into any size of stadium. So Hockey Ireland, for example, chose a slightly smaller stadium than England Hockey chose, a 6,000 seater, and worked over a 3G pitch at Leinster's Leinster Rugby's B venue. So you can select the size of venue that's right for the growth of hockey, for the size of the National Association, and for the stage of that sports development in that particular country or territory. And I think the biggest win from an England hockey perspective about what this gives us is access to a better fan experience, but also hospitality facilities within permanent stadiums, much more permanent seating. A lot always comes down to toilets, and we spend thousands hiring temporary toilets on an annual basis, where you go to a stadium like the Stoop and they have the right number of toilets to service that number of fans. So there's so many wins, and just the atmosphere as well that environment gave us. It means that more fans are going to get more excited about our sport, and we can reach more people, and the televisual outcome from that as well. Broadcasters were also really happy with the product that they gave, and it gives that big stadium hockey feel to it. So you know, in summary, from our perspective, players really enjoyed that environment. It was better for fans. They had great bars, food around it, atmosphere, and as I said, better for broadcasters, and gives sponsors and hockey a chance to grow without having to invest in building huge stands and investing in permanent infrastructure that at the moment our sport can't necessarily fully afford.
Yeah, well, I was lucky enough to be invited along with you to see the game, and it really was a fantastic experience. And it was hard to kind of recognise the Stoop as a rugby venue when it was fully given over to hockey. And I think you had nearly 13,000 people for the final event.
Yeah, and you know, that's we were coming off the back of a World Cup where we did put temporary seats in, got 10,000, and it was important for us to continue to grow that fan base. So you know, our normal fan base at Lee Valley is around 4,000 for a match. So you know, 3 times that for that weekend, and yeah, it was great.
Brilliant. Okay, well, I think we'll leave it there, Sue. We've got a nice video to play out on, which was produced after the event, which gives viewers a bit of an idea of the actual experience and how many people are actually there. So thanks again, Sue. Really appreciate that. A really nice way to finish off this series.
Thank you.
Thank you.
we'll leave you with the video, and I hope to see you soon. We're looking to do some more of these videos in the future as topics come up. So thanks for watching, and see you soon.
Bye.